Okay, got it. Okay. Hi, Keith. Thank you for letting me do this presentation on decision making for the ALS members and people who are interested in this topic. I'm Pat Melzer. I'm the founder and president of A Passion for Care. We're a non-medical home care agency that started in 2010, got our first client in early 2011. And we started out like many people who have had a family member with care needs. And that was what triggered a whole change in career, which was originally computer industry work for 23 years. And then I stayed home for 11. And when I decided to do the business, I wanted to make it about best practices. So I studied gerontology at San Diego State. I earned a CNA and a home health aide. Also an RCFE administrator certificate. I've personally done thousands of hours of caregiving and for an ALS client and for many other types, Parkinson's and dementias and all types cancer, lots of hospice work we've done. In 2021, I actually finally formalized, I'm a certified senior advisor, and I was the 2019-2020 chair of the San Diego Regional Home Care Council. And our main goal is to hire and manage the best caregivers out there. And we work at that day in, day out. This was from November, so a few changes are coming. We've just hired an additional person to be director of operations, but this was our management team as of November rather. And then this is just a sample pre-COVID training day that we had here in our office, where it is 5 hours annual training that's required. And we brought a professional in to do the training and had just a great time. And now that COVID is kind of under wraps, I think we'll start the in-person training again. And here we are doing some role playing. And these are different organizations that we belong to. As I mentioned, the Home Care Council, Certified Senior Advisor Group, which is a lot of training and just access to good information for everyone. The Home Care Association of America, HR California, which keeps us compliant, and American Society on Aging. And this is, I won't read it, but it's a thank you from our first ALS client. And I just can't tell you how precious these words were to me for the work that we did for that person. So now I'm going to switch to, let's see, I'm going to switch to, and this is the main presentation on the decision making. Okay. Does it look good, Keith? I think we're good.
I still have the thank you card on the screen.
Okay, do you see it now? Do you see this?
I still see the thank you card.
Okay, let me, oh, a new share. Okay, sorry, I had to do a new share.
No worries.
There we go. Okay, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Okay, so these slides that I'm going to present are a portion of a workshop that I presented to Aging in America in 2014. And the topic is problem solving tools and techniques for navigating aging transitions. What it really is a set of tools you can use for decision making and hopefully getting you to the best decision possible. So at this time, we presented with Roz Alana, who I met originally from San Diego Hospice. She and I did 2 or 3 workshops together. And then my husband and business partner on the right has been very interested in critical thinking and these kinds of topics for many years. So we put this workshop together. And the motivation, why we chose this topic, was we see people who are making bad decisions. And they often don't involve people who are affected that should be involved in working out the best options. They're stuck. They either do nothing, which is very common, or they suffer from poor outcomes just because they go with their gut without thinking things through. We want to share the limitations of the human brain and why it is that humans are so bad at making decisions. And there are some good reasons for that. And then the full workshop really went into several different decision-making tools. You can obviously have like a T-bar, you can flip a coin, et cetera. But the Kempner Trigo is a methodology that's been used in business since the 1950s, 60s, and literally over 1 million people have been trained in Kempner-Trigo. And it can be very, very valuable for dealing with complex things as well as very simple decisions like which refrigerator to buy, which we'll get into that a little later. And so the motivation again is to help people making better decisions and get them thinking in the right way on how they can do that. So we'll go a little bit into what it is, how it works, and why you would want to use it. And we'll start here then with why humans are poor decision makers. So if you take honeybees, who've been around for about 30 million years, they're remarkable decision makers, and they have a leaderless distributed search strategy, and it's actually perfection. So what they do, every spring when the hive becomes full, they need to split off and start a new hive. And what they do, they send out searchers and they go look for a new place. They come back, and with their excitement, they do a little dance and they wiggle. And if they wiggle real excitedly, it's like, okay, I've got a really good place. And so they recruit then other bees to go check it out. And then they're all doing this. They're all distributed and they're going out looking for their new hive. And then they come back, and it's the excitement of the new location that gets everybody on board. And then they decide to go follow the most excited, and they found the perfect home. Humans, on the other hand, our brains are designed to conserve energy and to cut corners, like templates. So in short, our brains are lazy. And studies have shown that our conscious brain processes about 45 bits per second, as opposed to our subconscious brain, which is over 11 million bits per second. We're constantly making decisions. I just read recently about 35,000 decisions per day. It can be as simple as, am I going to set my alarm in the morning? Am I cold? Am I hot? Do I need to change the temperature on the thermostat? All kinds of decisions that we're thinking about usually vary with a template based, where we're just going very, very quickly. We also suffer from what's called confirmation bias or gut instinct. And I think as a country, we're suffering that right now. We're looking for points that will confirm our preconceived notions rather than opening up and looking at bigger alternatives. And that's a confirmation bias is a huge issue that we deal with. And there are a long list of other biases. And then the bottom line is we define our choices for decisions often far too narrowly. We don't look outside enough. And then you've got additional complexities. So you're faced with a problem. And as I'm sure you all know, it's often a result of an unexpected trigger event, can be a serious life situation that will affect your quality of life, your health, or even life and death. You have family members, they're blended, they may be geographically in different locations, which makes it difficult to get their input and respect that input. And you have some people making these decisions that have too much influence, and then others who have no influence. And you have some that are helpless and hopeless, and the list goes on. There are other complexities too. There can be legal, ethical, financial issues that will affect our decisions. And then the big one is our own emotion. And we all have it. And especially if you are the person who is dealing, especially with, aging transitions and worries about isolation and changing relationships, becoming dependent on people, fear of abandonment, fear of death, loss of your self-image, all of these things are playing into how we perceive things and how we go about making decisions. And these are underlying stresses that make it very difficult. So a sample of typical problems that we see, one can be which option should you go with for a major medical decision, where to live after early declines, when and how to give up driving, whether you should use a stronger medication or not, where to spend this year's holiday dinner, and which refrigerator or car to buy. These are all kinds of problems. Obviously, some require a lot more in-depth analysis and objectives and trying to work through them. Some are easier than others. Obviously, picking a refrigerator isn't life or death, but they're all decisions that we have to make. Typical. So here's a major medical decision, just an example of one. This was actually, the photo is from a dermatology teaching school, but the problem is one that we faced in our own family. About 25% of the population has a venous insufficiency. And we had an 87-year-old male who was otherwise healthy, very socially active, and he had suffered from severe acute status dermatitis on his left leg. So there was a medical decision at this point in time that needed to be made. The options were to do nothing, another was stent surgery, and another was amputation. Those kinds of decisions need to be worked through very carefully. You obviously have a gut reaction, and many people would automatically, but it's still worth going through the process of looking what the alternatives are. So in order to do that, you start out by, well, what's the major element of a good choice? And it's really important that you focus on the definition of what's the most important, what's the real problem, what is the most important thing we're dealing with here? And sometimes that can be vague, especially if you're looking at moving situations. You might think it's one thing and there's really a lot more that's really the real problem. The quality of the evaluation then will lead you to looking at the possible alternatives. And that's what you want to do, is bring in what are the most important things that we should be evaluating and to come up with the right solution. And the quality of understanding what those alternatives are is very important as well. So it's, again, because of our tendency to use templates and quickly get to solutions, this just means that it's really worth the time it takes to define the problem, consider all of the alternatives, and then to evaluate each alternative, including the risks. Okay, so kind of summarizing that part again, you define the decision that solves the right or the real problem. You also need to, in this, often plan for who is involved, what they will be doing, where they will be involved, when, in this case, when it happened, is refers to if there's been a change that you're trying to sort out, and the extent of involvement for people who will be solving this dilemma. And when you clarify then what you're really trying to achieve, including the concerns, this becomes your objective. Okay, and then as you drill down, you describe how well each alternative meets your objectives. Who is it best for? What's it best for? Think and explore, look for suggestions, and then look for other alternatives. Think about the risks, the consequences, and other uncertainties, and then even future decisions that you might have to make based on it. And know when to quit looking. There probably isn't going to be a perfect solution. So at some point you need to stop evaluating and make your decision. So what's missing? Well, we're not rational, as we've already discussed, and we're not objective. We don't understand the problem. Our emotions are hard to suppress. It's hard for the decision maker to know what is important. We're not always creative in finding alternative paths, and we're not fully researching those either. And then there's no structure for comparing the alternatives. So the whole purpose of my using the Kempner-Trigo is to show that there's a simple structure that can help people start drilling down and working on these better solutions. When we did the full workshop, we looked at some of the different tools that are out there for making decisions, including you can flip a coin, right? A lot of us use that one. But we focused on the Kempner-Trigo again because it has the must-haves and the wants. And so that's such a basic concept to get across that we really like that in terms of using it with our clients and ourselves for that matter. So the must-haves, these are mandatory. They're not negotiable. They can be different if you're talking about family situations. One person's must-have may be different than another person's must-have. And by putting these down on paper, you can then compare them and discuss them. A must-have has to be achievable to make this as a successful decision. And ideally, it's measurable and objective. And then after the must-haves, which again are not negotiable, then you have the wants, and these are everything else. But when you have the everything else components, you then need to weight them, and come up with the ones that are really more important. And again, each person would go through this process. So if you're looking at a situation that we show at the very end is a role model getting you thinking on this. And one was you have a father who is aging in California, you have a daughter in Illinois and a daughter in Florida. Where is he going to live? That sort of thing. So you're going to pull these objectives in based on, you know, which is important for each person. Anyway, we'll get into that a little bit more. But again, to summarize this slide, you have your must-haves. Those are not negotiable, they're mandatory. You have your wants, and you will select them and weigh them by what's the most important to the least important. So you write down the decision, you list your attributes, which are the wants, and you research and then score them and analyze and reiterate until you come up with your decision. So when you're using the Kempner-Trigo, you create a table which has list your problem and then ultimately the decision. You list the attributes, as you can see here on the size, and that can be a whole variety of different things. You weight it, and then you look at alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 3. You multiply them out and you get a score. It's pretty simple. So let's look at a refrigerator example. So grandma's refrigerator is not working well. Which one should she buy? Low cost, because she's on a very tight budget, is important. So one weight, and this is a 10, makes it a must-have. So it must be low cost. It needs to be reliable. It needs to have the refrigerator size, a certain size, the freezer size, the color, warranty. These are all attributes that we wanted to assess in trying to make the decision on which refrigerator to buy. So if you look at this example, you keep the current refrigerator. So it's not working well, but do you keep it? Well, low cost, if you keep the existing one, it's going to be a 10. And that makes that a pretty easy decision. Just throwing out some examples, we looked at one for Costco, and that would give you a 4, and the Sears would be a 2, meaning that it was more expensive. And then you would go through the different components, the reliability. How important is that? Well, a 7 is important. The size doesn't seem to be so much. I guess grandma likes to have a lot of freezer food, so that weighed a little bit more than the refrigerator size. Color was obviously not important, and warranty wasn't either. So you put it all in the mix, score it, and we come up with Costco was the best choice. So this is just a simple example where you have the must-haves, which would be the low cost. You have the other factors, which are then of varying different weights. You multiply them out and you come up with your answer. So it's very simple on this level. And as you can imagine, as I said, that it's been used by over 1 million people in industry, in business. These tools by Kempner-Trigo have been used to solve very, very complex problems and issues that come up. Often that's what it is in business, not to go or no go on a certain thing, although it can be used for that, but often it's used for something's broken, what's different, what changed, and you can use these same concepts to work through those, and it can get very complicated. So again, you want to emphasize the problem, look at the characteristics for the alternatives to the problem, weigh them, score them, and then try it out, talk about it. And again, using this where you can write things down on paper gives you something to talk about with all of the stakeholders, the people that are partners in these decisions. I won't go into this example, but again, Kempner-Trigo does get very complicated, and there are used to be, and I don't think they support it any longer, but there was an online tool that you could put all of this in, and it would help lead you through the decisions. Right now, they have some cards that you can get for free online to help you work through it manually. And back to the situation where we had the stasis dermatitis. So we should probably have redone this one, I guess, a bit, but the number 10, so the most important, the must-have, was to minimize the effect on social life. That turned out to be, for this person, the most important thing. So that became a must-have. And the options for dealing with it was, again, to do nothing, to have stent surgery, or amputation. And in just kind of, without looking at these numbers at a higher level, the amputation would have permanently gotten rid of the pain that went along with that particular condition. It's not a fun thing to go through. It would affect social life, at least for a certain period of time. But the problem would literally go away because there would be no more pain in that part of the body. Stent surgery turned out to be a possibility, but it was not long lasting. So you would have a minimal effect on social life, but the surgery and the other things that go with it, it turned out to not be, well, actually it scored higher, but in the end, do nothing was what was chosen by this person. So minimize the family concern and impact. That was a must-have. Cost, let's see, oops, got that wrong. So the only must-have on this example is to minimize the effect on the social life. The other ones were weighted. So if you look at the number 8, the next one down would be to minimize the risk. So you obviously, if you have an amputation, that's going to be a high risk. Do nothing is very low risk, that sort of thing. Minimize long-term discomfort, somewhere around the middle. So do nothing ended up with a 2 because you're going to continue with the discomfort. Stent surgery would minimize the discomfort, and as would the amputation. At any rate, this exercise came through that the stent surgery would be the most practical and solve the most number of these different factors. In the end, this person decided to do nothing and is still alive and fairly thriving, although there is constant pain. So again, this tool just gives you ways of talking about it with your family and analyzing where you should go next. But then you think, well, that's not the result I expected. It's not the result I wanted. So maybe there's more work to do, as is in the example above, because it wasn't worked fully through. So go back and reevaluate what the weights were. Were they correct? Were they correct for everyone involved? Maybe there's more research that needs to be done. Maybe the stent surgeries can perform better. Maybe there's less rehabilitation with amputation. You may need to do more research, and that would be borne out if you actually work through it. And then alternatives. Maybe there were other alternatives that weren't on that short list. So again, it gives you an opportunity to go back and reevaluate, think outside the box, and come up with other ideas. You can review it with friends and family. You can share it in emails on the internet and pass it around if you're not located close together. And then you can wait some time and then revisit them again. So it does give you a stake in the ground to look at the important attributes, weigh them, look at alternatives, and to figure out what's the best approach. This part here, I'm not going to get into the detail, but it is the tool that was available online. And again, the cards will lead you through this in a manual process, but it's helping you state the decision, develop the objectives, classify them as musts and wants, weigh the wants, evaluate the alternatives, and screen through the whole bit of it. And again, it just gives you some form, a template, so that you can have the discussions, do the research, figure out who's going to do what, and which way you should go. Okay, we will gone over this already. Clarify the problem, clarify the emotions. Okay, those are hard to come out. We're dealing with one of those literally this morning. Very emotional decisions that are being made on behalf of a parent by the power of attorney, and it affects the family. It's very complicated things. I wish people would use this tool far more often. I think it would help these situations. But anyway, and then we ended the workshop with role playing. And I thought this was kind of cute. So many of you, not everyone, but maybe old enough to remember Dick and Jane. And actually in 1975, they came out with Fun Without Dick and Jane, which is pretty cute. So we took that and then asked the group that were attending the workshop to role play. So we have the father, we had the 2 daughters. They're, they don't live in different parts of the country, and they had about 20 minutes or so to work through the different situation, what's going on with the father, what should we do with dad, where does he go, and how does this affect everyone? And everyone really had a good time working through that. And let's see, yeah, so does he stay? Does he stay at home with caregivers? Does he move to Chicago or Tampa? If so, does he alternate seasonally? Does he stay with one or the other? Does he move to assisted living or continuous care community? All these decisions are being made. And again, it's just so much easier if you have a format, and I particularly think that this is a good one, to come up with your must-haves and your wants and get them out on the table, discuss them, look for alternatives. And there you have it. So that is, let's see, that's the end of that one. And I can definitely take questions. Also at the end, I will, let's see, do a new share. I will give you my contact information and let's see,
So
and
Pat, can you call up that?
the last slide,
Yeah, the last whole set of slides.
this
Go
one.
back to the
Oh, the last
results.
one. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, absolutely. Yeah, let me go back and do that. So let's see,
Okay.
new share, and I'm going back to this one. And slideshow, and where did you want me to go to? Which part of it?
It said, you know, the little, we got the results, but they weren't what we expected.
Okay,
Yes,
that's right, okay. Yeah.
that's the ticket.
Whoops, I'm gonna switch here. Okay.
Sure.
Here we go. This is not the result I expected.
Yeah, I love this slide because a lot of people get here.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, whatever their method was, you know, it's like, well, that's very interesting, but that's not what I want to do.
and that's all those emotions floating around, and those emotions got you there. And your brain just picked the laziest, not you, but the laziest way, the answer, because that's what we're accustomed to. We make these subconscious and already, you know, predictive things, our gut feel answers too often for us. And we need a mechanism to get beyond that. And to me, this must-haves and the wants is that tool.
Right. There's a parallel study on college-bound seniors or juniors going to campuses with their parents or whoever, and the decision-making process of the students. And it was amazing how many decisions are made in less than 90 seconds.
Right. Absolutely.
Based on stuff that would be what? That,
yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Pretty enlightening as to, like you said, how unthoughtful we can be on a major decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
so,
we don't realize.
To come back to this one because it's just so common. And, you know, it may be a point where, like you say, you know, were we really serious about the weight rather applied to the factors.
Right.
And give it some time. And then revisit, and then maybe talk to, you know, somebody like you. Say, okay, here's how we got where we are.
Right.
And let's talk this through.
That's fun, and that's a good point, Keith. Because bring in people. Don't be ashamed. Bring in professionals. Bring in people. You know, you can bring in people to say, "Hey, this is where we are. What are we missing?" And yeah.
Right. And these are big decisions, you know. I love the slide about where's dad going to live. That's every day. And, you know, now my loved one has this situation. We're 3,000 miles from the rest of the family, but we like it here, you know. So it's like,
right.
And then sometimes you divide and conquer and say, well, we're doing okay now. When we get to this point of need, well, then we get serious about, you know, relocating. But for now, we're gonna, you know, stay where we are.
At that point, that's when a lot of those decisions are made, because you don't do anything until there's an event, that trigger event, and then you're quickly making a decision, and you don't have time, you know, or the energy at that point to work through it.
So I think it's better to make the decision, set a date or a series of events that kicks it off. Yeah, not be reacting. Yeah.
Right.
So, so we do have someone who joined us. Selena, if you wanted to say hello, you're welcome. You don't have to. You have your hand up. I'm sorry. You have a question?
Hello. Yes, I do have a question, and I apologize. I am driving, so if there is sound in the background, that is why.
No
I
worries.
appreciate this presentation, and so thank you. My question actually pertains to methods of implementation of this process. When what I have found is with the individual or with any type of chronic end of life and or end of life illness, logic sometimes is not implemented. And so if you have a partner who's attempting to implement and engage this process with with their partner, what are methods that can be utilized to try and engage that other individual? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So how do you go about bringing other people in to the decision making?
Well, especially the individuals that, yes, but especially the individual that it affects.
Okay. Well, it depends on their capabilities, number one. So it's going to be harder if they're at a point where that's difficult. And as that journey and the decline happens, you do reach a point where you almost can't bring them in. But if they're able to, I would start by really focusing on what they need, what almost speaking, not for them, but with them, helping really bring out what their thoughts are and their wishes. And I think if they know that you're there to help them, if they really sense that, I think you can make some progress bringing them in. I don't know if that answers it enough.
Yeah, and yeah, so she's texting us. There's Selena, you really hit on a hot button. Some people are receptive to conversations about goals of care and the future and what a care plan's gonna have to look like 6 or 8 months from now or a year from now. Other people refuse to even engage that conversation. So you are right. There are some very skilled social workers, psychologists, people like Pat, who's been around the block for many years, that can sometimes be good because they can come in and kind of gently initiate those difficult conversations, and they go away. So if the loved one, let's just say I'm there helping this conversation, and I bring up something and the response is very strong, very negative, don't want to talk about that, or, whatever. Well, I go home, and I have thick skin, so I'll come back. It's not a problem. But sometimes it's easier of a third party who's not so emotionally involved, who's not going to be there the rest of the afternoon and the next 4 days. It's a tough thing. There is a book that I'll plug, and I don't know if Pat, you've ever read this one. It's simply called Difficult Conversations. And I think they do a good job just kind of throwing out different ways to go at this. So that might be helpful. But aside from the book, there's resources on, your care team at the clinic or within our community, our extended family, that'll be happy to gently engage those conversations with sometimes it's by committee. I mean, I've been in a living room and you've got, the kids are there, the grandparents are there, and there's already factions before I come in the door about who wants what, So it's just, it can be very delicate. But I think when you let people, gently be heard, and some reflection and bring up topics that maybe should be on the table, but nobody wanted to talk about. Over time, things tend to to formulate into a plan or strategy. Not always, but we can help the process. So, lean on your external resources. And I almost encourage the committee meeting with the family, because it avoids well, I wasn't there, I'm sure that's not what they meant, stuff that comes up later. But it's also, it can be a very intense 90 minutes. But that's okay. We're happy to engage that. And sometimes you find out that, wait, this is way more involved, and maybe we need some professional resources or come at it. And the other person that can be really helpful with these conversations are your neurologist or your family practitioner that maybe is known for 30 years. They could have some counsel and wisdom, and sometimes a voice that is more accepted than some stranger who just walks in. So, but yeah, very delicate. I'm happy to get you some resources, Selena. It's tough. It's tough.
It is tough. And especially for the main person, that you're focusing on, it's very, very tough for them. And to make sure that they have voices that will, help them articulate their wants and needs too. And
right. And it gets even more complicated when somebody is losing their cognitive capabilities. Right. Not terribly common, but we do have FTD in our community. Some researchers say it's 10-15%. Others are saying it's probably closer to 50% to some degree, and we maybe need to be spending more attention to that up front. But you just have to have that sensitivity and listen and, give the affected parties. This disease, in the case of ALS, affects the whole family. It's not just the patient. And when we have these discussions, we just have to recognize that and let people have a voice and understand and be there for them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, tough stuff. It really is. So yeah, I mean, that's really we're right back to this page.
Right.
Not the result I expected,
Right. And then keep working on it.
Yeah, what you don't want to do. Selena, is it okay if I go to an end of life story situation? Is that gonna be okay? Yeah. Okay. Yes. What you don't want to do is have a medical emergency. Your loved one gets a trach at the ER that no one was expecting. And now you've got 10 to 14 days to decide, do you make it permanent and make all those arrangements, or do you remove it and allow, natural process? And what you try to avoid in all of this is number one, hopefully you avoid the emergency room trip in the first place by having this decision way ahead of time. But stuff happens. And in California, even if your advance directives say, no artificial ventilation, if someone, when they see their loved one in a respiratory emergency, calls 911, the paramedics are going to come and they're going to go to the ER and they're going to get trached, regardless of the advance directive, because the question becomes, well, why'd you call 911? And for me, that's hard. I mean, how can I not call 911? My loved ones, experiencing this respiratory emergency. So it gets to be,
and with that,
complicated.
Keith, I'd like to add to that. We have a decision tree that we use for clients, and it's kind of about just that. It's like, what is urgent? What would trigger a 911 call versus what isn't, and that person's wishes, not emergency, that would trigger it. And then what is the call tree that you use? It's a two-page 2-page thing that we laminate. And it's really helpful for the people who are there at that moment. Because if they refer to that, then they can go, okay, this is my answer. This is the situation that's happening, and this is what we do. It's still difficult, right? You might be choking, you might be, bleeding, you might be whatever, but you need that direction. And if you look at that in advance, that can help that situation.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, depending on the circumstances, I still grab that phone.
For sure. For sure.
Can just see that happening. So where I was going is now we're, 7 days into the ICU unit. The families gathered around, and half of them don't know what the advance directives were, and they're finding out for the first time. They don't agree with them. And now we've got this made for TV, reality show happening right in the hospital. I thought, oh, yeah, this gentleman's checking on me because I'm pulled over the side of the road. I was like, hey.
You good, sir?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
No problem, brother.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good one. If you ever need us, man, give us a call.
All right. Thank you. So 511, he's just checking to make sure I'm okay. So I had to pull over. And so back to this whole decision making, once the decisions are made, share it with the family so that, in this case, it was stepdaughter and son and daughter-in-law who never heard the advance directive to that moment. And their initial response was, no, you can't remove that trach. You've got to, we want him here, So, this can be pretty involved. And the more upfront we can do, and then once the decisions are made, we encourage folks, however you want to do it, let your loved ones know. So if they have concerns or issues, it can be handled before we're in the hospital. And some hospital administrator or doctor saying, okay, what do you want to do? I was like, so tough stuff. And it's case by case. You kind of feel your way through it. But there are resources at UCSD, different independent and nonprofits that this is what they have people, this is what they do. And then if you're associated with a hospice company, I'm just talking at 40,000 feet now, Serena, they have resources too for engaging these conversations and helping them along. But I'll get you that book, Difficult Conversations. Maybe there's some tidbits in there that are helpful. And does that help short term? Okay. Yeah, it's tough. So,
yeah,
all right.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So Pat, thank you for going back to the slide. I'll let
you no, thank you.
To the rest of your.
Okay.
But I knew this is where people get,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very common. And myself included, this would be like me, with a weight loss program. Yeah, okay. You want me to do all that? That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe next year.
Get your must-have. Your must-haves.
Oh, are we still recording? I know nothing about comfort food. That's my story. I'm sticking with it.
Now we're getting into completely different theories and models of change.
Yes, we are.
Now we're in health behavior.
All right, so we'll let you get to the end, Pat, and then we can.
Okay. I see a 3 by chat. Are there other questions?
Let me look.
I think
No,
there were
we're
just
good.
comments from earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are all fine.
Let me try to find now.
So, Selena, how did you send the chat messages while you were driving?
I was getting gas.
Oh, you're so good.
Okay, let me go.
I'm just
get
teasing.
this one.
Nice to see you again.
Now, have I shared this? I have the slide up, but I don't know if I've shared it
No,
yet.
we're not seeing it yet.
Okay. Let me. Let's see. I need to get rid of that one.
Not
There we
working.
go.
Huh?
Right here.
There
Now
it goes.
there we go. Okay, slideshow from the beginning and then switch.
Pat, as you're doing that, I just kind of wanted to comment. I feel from the previous discussion that you were presenting on for the decision-making process, it's also like the how to empower those who are in the decision-making process, how to just empower them in actually going through each step. It was more of a comment more than a question.
So how do you empower them? I mean, that's kind of tied with the other part too, is, you know, getting everybody moving and working on it. And in my mind, if you have a method like this, especially at its simplest level, the must-haves and the wants, you know, they can just start sharing, and maybe that's empowering them all by itself, right? To get it off the ground. Yeah. So I just wanted to end then with, you know, we have had a relationship with the ALS Foundation Association, and in memory of Elaine Metzger, who was a dear client of ours. We did a donation of a number of different in very excellent shape, recliner, a Hoyer lift, an extra large bed, this wheelchair here. It was an XL bed over the bed table, and then this shower chair. And again, it was all in honor of Elaine and her family. And we want to thank you for listening. And again, I'm very happy to reach out and help anyone through this decision-making process. My time is your time. I'm very passionate about wanting to help people. I don't have my email on here, but it's pat@apassionforcare.com. And the office number here will get you to me as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, we thank you very much, Patricia. And again, folks, when you watch this, you may not be ready to hire someone or get caregiver help. Go through the intake process way ahead of time, because it just helps organize. And then you have contacts and resources already in your Rolodex for when you might get closer to that point. So the earlier the better, can be very beneficial. With that, I'll end the recording of our care services meeting, and thank you so much.